Hospital equipment is an essential part of the patient's recovery. The effectiveness and reliability of hospital equipment is an important criterion hospital facilities should be aware of to ensure the safety and well-being of the patient. As technology advances, it is imperative to keep all equipment up to date to deliver the best possible care for the patient. Unfortunately, there are times that equipment does not provide an accurate or precise reading of the patient's current vital signs, especially oxygen saturation. An example of equipment malfunction is false readings from the pulse oximeter. Incorrect data can present a problem in the care of the patient, and the wires and cords associated with the pulse oximeter can present another problem, increasing the risk of patient falls in the hospital. 30 to 50% of falls in hospitals result in some injury, with fractures occurring in 1 to 3%, often leading to very poor outcomes and greatly increased lengths of stay.
Typical whole hospital studies reported rates of between 3 and 5 falls per 1,000 occupied bed days, representing over 1 million falls in the U.S. hospitals.
So in an article I read by Mitchell Capel called Injury to Endoscopic Personnel from Tripping Over Exposed Cords, Wires, and Tubing in the Endoscopy Suite, a preventable cause of potentially severe workplace injury, they found that during the 5-year study period, 3 endoscopic personnel suffered significant orthopedic injuries from slips, twists, and falls from tripping over cords, wires, or tubing lying exposed over the floor in the endoscopy suite. The resulting injuries consisted of 4th and 5th metacarpal hand fractures due to a fall after tripping on oxygen tubing, a rib fracture due to tripping on electrical wires trailing from an endoscopy cart, and a grade 2 ankle sprain due to the foot becoming entangled in oxygen tubing. All of these injuries resulted in lost days of work and in additional days of restricted work. Hi, Mr. Watkins. I'm Morgan. I'm going to be your nurse today.
Hello.
So I'm just going to get some vital signs and do a heart and lung assessment, okay?
Okay.
All these cords are all tangled.
I hate being hooked up to all of them.
I don't know how they get this way. Oh my gosh. All over the place here. Connect you to this. You see your finger. Oh!
Oh no!
I drank so much water. I think I need to go pee. I've fallen.
Your call light was on.
What took you so long?
I'm sorry, I have 6 patients today. I didn't have time to
This thing keeps
stop by.
beeping and I can't.
You have to have it like this. It can't be sideways or anything. It's really temperamental. And the wire and everything.
This is so frustrating. For forming the team, we separated into roles. Lisa Bruno was the overseer. She pretty much just directed and supervised the members. The outliner was me, Leslie Asan. I was responsible for editing the video and handing off the information to the video editor. I was also responsible for making the script. Erin Shipman, she was the video editor. She was responsible for putting the video together. And finally, Emily Anderson and Morgan Ewing, they were responsible for literature researchers. They made sure to find articles and find facts for our project.
For setting aims, we had to make a list of items that the group saw as potential quality challenges, and we did our clinical at Rockingham Memorial Hospital. So there we found that there are too many wires attached to patients in post-operative care. That becomes a safety risk for patients on high fall risk. IVs, pulse oximeters, telemetry boxes, call bells, and phone cords are included in that. It's also a safety risk for the nurses themselves. Time is also wasted maneuvering patients through wires and disconnecting them to replace them once ambulation is done as well. Washing hands or donning the right PPE. Also, isolation warning signs were too small to be seen when entering rooms at RMH. No isolation cart was in the hallway as well to alert staff members, and only one room is available for a staff member to take off the PPE as well, which is making it unsterile. Found that the amount of time it takes to track down a nurse by a tech or student is also very long. There's poor communication between student and staff. Nurses are busy with other patients and cannot answer their phones all the time as well. A nurse tracking system or voice automated call system could be implemented, which we think may be able to support that. Another thing we found as a challenge was a belief educational system. We think that for patients with a different belief system, there should be a sort of educational system that nurses can go to as a means to understand a better way to provide the correct care for that patient. Instead of nurses should know how to treat patients different for the individual beliefs, information on patients' belief can be researched in a database provided by the hospital itself, which is the belief educational system. We also found that labeling IVs and procedural equipment is insufficient as well. Labeling IV, that the amount of time it takes to track down a nurse by a tech or student is also very long. There's poor communication between student and staff. Nurses are busy with other patients and cannot answer their phones all the time as well. A nurse tracking system or voice automated call system could be implemented, which we think may be able to support that. Another thing we found as a challenge was a belief educational system. We think that for patients with a different belief system, there should be a sort of educational system that nurses can go to as a means to understand a better way to provide the correct care for that patient. We also found that labeling IVs and procedural equipment is insufficient as well. For this quality improvement is that within 1 month of our quality improvement, there will be no recorded nurse and patient falls related to entanglement from continuous pulse oximeter cords.
So we decided to pick some measures that demonstrate need for change in our quality challenge. So some measures for the change we picked were the amount of falls that are present, because both nurses and patients have a chance to fall and they both can obviously trip over some wires within a patient's room. Also, how much time it takes to get someone's pulse ox reading with a continuous pulse ox versus a non-continuous pulse ox. Also, how often the patient complains about the amount of wires within the room, the amount of time the nurse is in the room, and also nurses' opinions on the amount of wires within their patients' rooms. The two main measures we decided to use were the amount of falls and patient complaints. They were both very measurable, and every hospital and unit has data on the amount of falls, so we figured that'd be pretty easy to find. And patient complaints are also very measurable, and there's always data showing us what patients we're not happy with. We could also do a survey with our patients too, wondering or asking them about their thoughts on the amount of wires in the room.
Right. For selecting change, we looked to the literature to see what others had done to solve our challenge of too many wires on the floor. And from going through the literature, we found that most of the sources suggested getting wires up off the floor. One source described covering the wires up with a non-slip mat, but another one actually quoted this one as a hazard to nurses. They also suggested ceiling plugs for wires so they weren't on the floor and trippable. And one of our sources actually suggested a wireless pulse oximetry ring for the patient to wear so there was no cord and it was much more accurate. So we identified the wireless pulse oximetry ring as our invention. This ring uses a similar LED technology as the current pulse oxes, with a slight angle alteration because of the bone in the finger. The LED light is able to read the oxygenated and deoxygenated blood levels, which is how it tells how oxygenated the blood is. This device should solve several different problems that are with the continuous wired pulse oximetry. Firstly, you don't need to remove nail polish anymore from the patient because the ring goes here on the finger, so nail polish no longer interferes with the reading. For obese or edematous patients, the ring will be able to clamp on, so it'll allow for bigger or smaller fingers.